The ending of Amphibia is approaching, but Anne still hasn't secured a way of returning to Amphibia. Is it really possible without the Calamity Box? What happens if the box and gems perish in the war against the core, and the worlds are separated forever? Are Anne and the Plantars destined to part ways for good? That's what we are discussing in this video. The possibility that the box can easily be used even after the enemy is defeated does exist, but makes only the slightest amount of sense. After the whole show has practically been continuously revolving around the gems, not having something huge happening with them when it all comes down would be the definition of anticlimactic. Instead, what comes to mind first, appearing to be the likeliest alternative, is that by the end of Amphibia, the gems have been destroyed. Perhaps it is necessary to destroy them in order to kill the beast, because their fates are bound to each other. Or maybe it's ultimately just the best idea to get rid of them to prevent anyone from ever abusing their powers for world conquering again. One way or another, the main factor determining whether Anne and the Plantars can continue seeing each other is not how or why the stones are destroyed, but what happens when they are gone. Based on all the instances in which we saw the Calamity Box in action, the gems appear to be like keys that open the door to another world. Going by that logic, if the keys were to go missing, the only consequence would be that the other world can no longer be accessed, as the door cannot be opened anymore. However, we do have to admit that we know basically nothing about the gems. Seeing that even at this stage of the show, new elements like the Mother of Olms keep on being added, it's definitely within the realm of possibility that the gems' importance goes beyond simply connecting the worlds. If, for instance, they are the very essence that constitutes the boundaries between the individual worlds, then their sudden disappearance could cause the realms to overlap and melt into each other. If that reminds you of the Star vs. the Forces of Evil finale, and you remember how that turned out, then you have already found an important argument making the latter alternative more unlikely. Apart from the fact that in Amphibia's case, not 2, but 6 worlds unification would have to be presented believably, a big part of the isekai genre's charm is that there are strictly separated worlds and a few select people from one world are all alone with their struggles in the other world. Undoing one of the show's most basic principles would not only mean the significant loss of charm, over and above that, a new light would be cast on a major share of previous events. The planners' kindness to take in a person that only intended to use them as shelter until they could go home, and the fact that they still developed such a strong bond despite knowing that the day would come that they see each other for the last time, would lose so much of their bittersweet beauty. A similar effect would also be observable for Marcy and Sasha. Everything these two have done, they've done believing what happens in Amphibia is 100% independent from their normal lives on Earth. Sasha's journey to overthrow an entire kingdom, seeing nothing but her own goals and coming to understand what a jerk she's been, would all wind up pointless if the consequences of her actions lose their impact when such a drastic change like the unification of the worlds takes place. Marcy's betrayal and the suffering she's currently enduring due to her mistakes would all have been for nothing if the worlds end up combined. Her development must come to an end by her willingly deciding to go home and face her parents, instead of being forced to by events that were inevitably going to happen, making it seem like there should have been no reason for her to make the mistakes in the first place. In other words, Amphibia was like the means, an extreme therapy session for the purpose of having the girls mature. Now, there's nothing left for them in Amphibia. The show was always meant to be a 3-act story, suggesting that it was was also always meant to have a clear-cut ending that leaves next to no room for free interpretation regarding what happens to the characters after the show is finished. They all go home to continue their lives, and that's it. At this point, we additionally need to consider that Amphibia is heavily inspired by Matt's own experiences of going to Thailand and having to leave again, despite having come to feel at home there. Nonetheless, despite ticking some stereotypical boxes, Amphibia walked down a different path than expected countless of times before, and is different from lots of other isekai media. Most notably, the show did not kick off with Truck-kun transferring the girls to Amphibia. Moreover, from the beginning, the possibility of going home has always been in Han's reach, and who would have thought during season 1 that the show would ever be set on Earth? So, funnily, it would not be surprising if the ending surprises us with a completely unexpected way of securing the contact between Anne and the Plantars. For example, Dr. Frakes managed to open a portal to another world, if only a small one. In order to reach Amphibia soon, Anne's powers will probably be necessary. But no one can say for sure that it's impossible to create a functioning portal without the gems. In accordance, perhaps Matt prefers to ultimately convey that people can feel at home in several places, and should have the freedom to stay in touch with both places and cultures.